Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I'm here to show you all the books that I have acquired over the past 2 months. Every time I keep saying I'm not going to get any more books, they just appear and I can't not get them. All of these are books that I'm so excited about and I'm thrilled to share them with all of you and get your thoughts and opinions. Firstly, in August, the first book I acquired was very kindly lent to me by Marissa of Blatantly Bookish when we visited one another, and that is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valenti. I have heard fabulous things about this book since I started watching BookTube, and so I am thrilled to get my hands on a copy. I know nothing about the plot, but the title just sounds so whimsical that I have to read it. Next is a book that I pre-ordered for an event in June and then it just took a while to get to me, and that is In the Heights Coming Home by Lin-Manuel Miranda, Chiara Alegria Jurez, I think, and Jeremy McCarter. This is the companion book to In the Heights, both the musical and the recent film. It's very much in the same style that the Hamiltome was in, where it is, I believe, the complete script and lyrics, but you also get insight from all the people involved with the project, be it the Broadway show or the new film, and you get insight into what and why they changed from the play to the film. I love the soundtrack for In the Heights. It is just beautiful and stunning. And so through that, I'm familiar with the plot, but I still haven't managed to watch the film to fill in the gaps in between the songs. But it looks wonderful, and I know I love most of it. So once I have watched the film, I will be reading this book to find out more. Next, after the death of Jill Murphy, I ordered a complete set of her children's books, the Worst Witch series. I already read book 1, so that is on a bookshelf in another room, and book 8 has just arrived, so I will be adding that to the stack soon. The Worst Witch, for if you're an American like me who is unfamiliar with the series, is about Mildred Hubble, and she is the worst witch in Miss Cackle's academy. Not through any defect, but just she tries very hard, but something always goes horribly wrong with whatever spell she is trying, with whatever potion she is brewing, not to mention the very high expectations of Miss Hardbroom and her nemesis, as it were, Ethel. They're very short, they're very sweet, they're cute comfort reads. And since I have caught bits and pieces of both television adaptations, the one from the early 2000s when I was on vacation in England, and the newer Netflix series, I thought it really behooved me to read the original novels. Next, I picked up another Susanna Kearsley book to fill out a stationery order I was placing to go back to work, and that is The Rose Garden. This is one that I have been wanting to read for a very long time before I even got started on my Susanna Kearsley kick, and based on the description, I absolutely love it. It sounds very much like The Winter Sea, which I adored, so I'm hoping I'll love this one just as much. This is a story about Eva Ward, who goes to visit a house in Cornwall where she has happy memories of visiting as a child. But she soon begins to have some sort of ancestral memory, dual life, flashbacks, I'm not entirely sure, but the past of this house begins to catch up with her present, forces her to look at her own life, possibly decide whether she belongs in the present or the past. There will, I would also assume, be some sort of love interest involved in all of that. Given my love for Outlander, for The Winter Sea, and for Poldark, this sounds amazing. Then we have 2 books that I have been hunting for ages, and so hunted down on independent sellers. The first is A Woman of Consequence by Anna Dean. This is an ex-library edition, so forgive the shininess. This is the third in the Dido Kent mysteries, which is a series of Regency mysteries following the spinster Dido Kent, who goes to visit friends and family and ends up having to solve mysteries while she's there. I loved the first two books in the series, and I read them years ago now. And I found what I thought was the next book in the series, so I brought it home. But recently I learned that it is in fact book 4 in the series, and that this is book 3. And these books have now gone out of print, so I have not been able to find a copy to fill in that gap before I can move forward. So I finally hunted this down through an independent online seller, and I'm very pleased to have it. And finally, from independent sellers, I also found out there is an Eva Ibbotson book that I missed, and I am thrilled to have another one. This one is called Madinsky Square. This book, like many of Eva Ibbotson's books, takes place in Vienna, and it all centers around Madinsky Square and the many characters who come in and out of that square for a variety of reasons. Her books are always sweet and cozy and engaging, and I'm thrilled to have a new one in my life. Then there was yet another library book sale recently, and so my coworker and friend Veronica and I took ourselves there as a reward for having made it through the first week of school. The first 4 books we found are vintage editions, which I'm so excited about. The first is an essay on Burns by someone named Carlyle. I love Robert Burns's poetry, and I love that this edition dates back to 1898, and I can't wait to read what they have to say about Burns's poetry. And then next to it, from 1895, we have this collection of Robert Burns' poetry itself, which someone has drawn the loveliest sketches on. I love that so much. So I can't wait to see if there are more inside as well. Then perhaps the 2 most exciting finds are this edition of East Lynne from 1871, which might be the first American edition of this book. I'm not entirely sure though. I have heard wonderful things about East Lynne. It's a Victorian, definitely a Victorian novel, possibly a sensation novel. And I would love to read it one day. However, I'm terrified to read it out of this edition because I'm afraid it will fall apart. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do with this yet, but I'm thrilled to have found it. And then finally, I found this travel guide to Bath, England by Edith Sitwell from just after World War II. I think it dates from 46 or 48. I lived in Bath for a few months, and it has become my second home, so I can't wait to read through this to see what it was like in the post-war era. Then we move on to more modern finds. The first is The Joys of Yiddish by Leo Rosten. My mother owns Hooray for Yiddish, which was the first edition of this book, and so I thought I should have the more modern, updated edition. This is basically just a dictionary of Yiddish words and phrases, and given that I grew up in a family where, or at least my parents' generation, all lived on Long Island, my grandparents' generation grew up in Brooklyn and the Bronx and worked in many primarily Jewish workplaces, had many Jewish friends and family. Yiddish is part of our lexicon and part of the way we speak. So I am thrilled to have this so I can look up how to spell various phrases that we use, and in addition get more clarity on some of the phrases that we use and discover new ones. I then found another Susanna Kearsley. I am on a roll. The universe wants me to have all the Susanna Kearsleys. This one is called Mariana, which I know was also very popular pre The Winter Sea, so I'm very intrigued to see what it has in store. I'm just going to read you the back because the back is very short and gives you very little to go on, but it's very intriguing. Julia Beckett believes in destiny. Settling into her rustic new home, Julia encounters haunting remnants of a beautiful young woman who lived and loved there centuries ago. It seems Mariana has been waiting for Julia. Apparently it takes place in Cornwall. It sounds gothic and ghostly and just utterly wonderful, so I can't wait to see what this is actually about. I then found the screenplay for Jojo Rabbit, written by, well, it was adapted by Taika Waititi. And I have the original book, Caging Skies, over here on my TBR, because I've been curious to watch this film. It looks amazing. And so when I saw this screenplay, I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to do a dual read of both the original novel and this adapted screenplay to compare the book and the film and how similar they actually are. Because that's a question that's been rattling around in my mind. If you're not sure what Jojo Rabbit is about, it is about a young boy, I think he's 10 or younger, certainly no more than that, who is growing up in Nazi Germany and fully believes in the culture around him. He is part of Nazi youth, he's going to school, he thinks that all of this is perfectly normal because it's all he ever remembers. But as the war goes on, he suddenly discovers that his mother is hiding a young Jewish girl in their attic. And he starts to have a crisis of faith, let's call it. He starts to question his entire life, and is all of this really the right way to do things? Are there other ways to do things? Which I think would be fascinating from the perspective of a young boy. What made the film extra funny is that Jojo has an imaginary friend in the form of Adolf Hitler, but Hitler has filtered through a 10-year-old's mind, which of course makes him quite funny to us, which kind of, to me, sucks the power out of him. Which I'm sure, as Taika Waititi called the film an anti-hate satire, I'm sure that was part of his objective in doing that. But I don't know if that element of it was in the original book. So I've been rambling on long enough, but I'd be really intrigued to compare these two to see how they stack up against one another. Another tiny book I found was A Modest Proposal and Other Satirical Works by Jonathan Swift. I read A Modest Proposal back in university, and I loved it, even though it is horrible. You love it if you have a very dark sense of humor, as clearly Jonathan Swift did. But I couldn't remember if I owned a physical copy of it somewhere, if it was bound up in one of my textbooks, or was it just a printout from one of my professors? So I decided to get this copy just in case. If you haven't read it, A Modest Proposal is a satirical piece that Jonathan Swift wrote for a newspaper, I can't remember which one, in the 1700s about what to do about the problem of starvation in England and overpopulation in Ireland. It gets dark very quickly. Like I said, it is for people with dark and twisted senses of humor, but I really enjoyed studying it, at least. So I'm pleased to definitely have a copy of it now. Another book I was really pleased to find is Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. Megan of Megan the Story Girl read this a few months ago now, I think, and absolutely loved it and was encouraging me to read it. So I was thrilled to find a discard copy that the library was giving away so that I can read it. Oh my gosh, I've just read something on the back that explains so much. Anyway, this is the story of Judy Abbott, who is an orphan who suddenly has a mysterious benefactor offer to pay for her college education. And she's thrilled and she's grateful and she has a wonderful time in college. But all the time she is writing letters to this man, but he never wants her to know his name. So she starts to call him Daddy Longlegs, and part of it is her constantly wondering who this man could be and why he would have chosen her to give this wonderful gift to. And on the back it says it includes an introduction by Eva Ibbotson. So clearly they are similar in style or tone or something, and since I love Eva Ibbotson, I'm very intrigued to see if I like this one as well. Another classic I found is An Old-Fashioned Girl by Louisa May Alcott, which I believe is one of her standalone novels, which I have never read. And again, I heard about it through Megan the Story Girl, and so I thought I would pick it up and give it a try. It is the story of Polly Milton, who goes to visit the very wealthy Shaw family and begins to feel very out of place, especially compared to the Shaw's daughter, Fanny. And I would imagine that it is about her growing up and coming into her own under those circumstances. And the last classic I found is Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. This is apparently the first in Trollope's Palliser series, which I have never read. In fact, I have never read any Trollope, but I have been wanting to for a while. And so when I saw this, I picked it up, even though I have no idea what goes on in it. Although clearly there is some betrayal or some perceived betrayal based on the title. Apparently the two major themes it covers is number one, what should a woman do with her life? And number two, it compares politics with private life in the Victorian era, both of which I think are fascinating questions. So I can't wait to read this one at some point. I don't know that I'll be able to read it in Victober, but I will definitely hang on to it, and it will definitely be at the back of my mind. One non-fiction book I found, even though it was shelved in fiction, whoops, was Elizabeth of York by Alison Weir. So this is the story of Elizabeth of York, who was Henry VII's wife and mother to Henry VIII, among others. And she is a fascinating person, and I read the Philippa Gregory book, The White Princess, about her, and it certainly filled in some gaps, but I'm very intrigued to read some non-fiction about her to see how that measures up to what I know and what I think I know about the real Elizabeth of York. I think my best finds possibly are coming up. First is this monster of a book, The Eighth Life by Nino Haratisvili, which is translated from the Georgian, I believe, unless they speak Russian in Georgia, I'm not sure. But the author is from the country Georgia. Therefore, it is translated by Charlotte Collins and Ruth Martin. This is being called the War and Peace of the 20th century. And it starts right on the brink of the Russian Revolution with a very prosperous family who is prosperous because they have an amazing chocolate recipe. It is almost magical. It may actually be. I'm not sure if there's a little bit of magical realism going on in here. So the young woman Stasia learns this tradition from her father. Then she and her husband take it further north to Petersburg as they become part of the revolution. And then we follow the path of this recipe and this family throughout further generations. And that sounds absolutely wonderful. I have never read anything from Georgia before, and this has been an international bestseller, so I'm very pleased to have gotten a copy to see for myself. My other truly exciting find was this. This is Mistress of My Fate by Hallie Rubinhold. Hallie Rubinhold is the author of The Five, which was hugely popular and deservedly so, and also one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time, The Scandalous Lady W, or The Lady in Red. And so this is part of a historical fiction series that she has written that takes place in the 18th century in England with a young woman, Henrietta Lightfoot, who has to fight her way out of very difficult circumstances by any means she can, be that feminine wiles or her wit and intelligence. And you need to tell me no more. I love the sound of all of that, and I am so pleased to have found a copy. You literary people will appreciate this quote from the back. The Independent, the British newspaper, said that Henrietta is 2 parts Lizzie Bennet and Tom Jones's Sophia Western to 1 part Moll Flanders with a splash of Fanny Hill. That sounds incredible. Next, I also found this copy of Between the Assassinations by Aravind Adiga, who is the author of The White Tiger, which is also on my TBR, and I'm very excited to read it. Aravind Adiga seems to write wonderful contemporary fiction novels about very gritty and very dark goings-on in either India. One is set in Dubai, so he may branch out a bit. But the two I have are set in India. And this one covers a variety of people's stories. Indeed, the entire front flap is covered with descriptions of all of these different stories. So I can only assume that either all of those stories somehow interlink with one another, or that it is a book of short stories. I'm not entirely sure which, but either way they sound wonderful, so I'm very intrigued to read it. And finally, I found a copy of The Power by Naomi Alderman. This was, of course, hugely popular a few years ago, and I have heard mixed things from a variety of people, but I've been wanting to read it for myself, but I haven't wanted to pay full price for it. I loved Disobedience by Naomi Alderman, but that is a completely different genre. Disobedience is a contemporary book about the modern, or relatively modern, because I don't remember exactly when it was set, Orthodox Jewish community in London, and discussing the possibility of LGBTQ relationships within that community. Whereas this one looks at what if teenage girls developed the ability to conduct electricity when they reached puberty. What would that do to the power structure in certainly the US, if not the world? So definitely more futuristic sci-fi fantasy here, so I don't know if I'll love it as much as Disobedience, but I am willing to give it a go and find out. So there you have it. Those are all of the books that I picked up in the past 2 months. More than I thought I was going to, but I think all very worthwhile books to have found. Let me know down below if you have any thoughts about any of them, which I should move further up my TBR. If you hated one of these books, please don't tell me just yet. Wait till I've read it, then we can discuss it. But until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.